7 Short Stories of Cheating. This is the first in a series of very short stories where all the action takes place in the span of seconds to a few minutes. In retrospect, I realized that I shouldn't have come to my wife's Christmas party at work. I've been having stomach problems for the last 3 days. I'm just starting to come around. I missed 2 days of work because of them, and I can't remember the last time that happened. I'm a contract worker, in case you were wondering. Jeannie has been with her current company for 3 years, but this will be the first Christmas party I attend since I've been away for the last 2. Judging by her disappointment in the previous 2 years, I assumed that she was keen for me to attend the party and get to know my colleagues. Although now, reflecting on it, I can see that she wasn't too insistent that I attend this year. But being the considerate husband that I am, I decided that I would squeeze my buttocks together, put on a monkey suit, and walk her to the door of the posh hotel where the party would be held. She managed to introduce me to a couple people before I was pierced by an all-too-familiar sharp desire rumbling in my stomach. Damn it. Finding a restroom and a vacant stall went from good reconnaissance to an urgent task in an instant. In record time, my pants were at my ankles, and I breathed a sigh of relief as gravity and pressure did their thing. I was just wiping myself down when 2 guys walked in. I realized they were using the urinal. As they walked in, they carried on a conversation. Peeing off didn't slow the conversation down in the slightest, but what I overheard slowed me the hell down. In fact, it made me stop wiping completely. More than that, it made my blood run cold in my veins. Damn, man, she looks hot in that red dress. Yeah, I can see why Clive is sleeping with her. Come on, it's just office gossip. Bollocks, I heard it from Sue, his secretary. She saw them coming in from work a couple weeks ago at that hotel around the corner. According to her, about twice a week he takes a couple hours off for lunch, and every time he does, Sue checks to see if that cheater is sitting at his desk during those couple hours. Damn, he works fast. He's only been here how long? A month? Well, yeah, but he's an eloquent bastard and a little younger than her. Yeah, and she's married, but I tell you what, they don't want old man Higgins to catch them. He's hard as a nail about this shit. Remember last year when he caught those 2 kissing under the mistletoe? Almost kicked their ass. The final exchange is accompanied by the sound of hands washing. What else they were saying is impossible to decipher, as their voices fade as they move toward the exit. Or maybe they are drowned out by the roar in my ears. The door opens and closes. The silence echoes. All I can hear is the beating of my own heart. And it's fast. Too fast. What bothered me about their dialogue? Jeannie, my wife of 8 years, looks simply stunning in the new red dress she bought for tonight's party, and come to think of it, she's been a little quieter than usual in the last month or so. Overwhelmed by a sudden sense of urgency, I hurriedly finished getting myself cleaned up. I need to get back to the ballroom and see how many other women have a red dress on. There has to be at least one. They couldn't be talking about my Jeannie. Finished washing my face, I re-enter the ballroom, heart somewhere close to my rebellious gut, and look around. For a brief moment, relief. Red seems to be a very popular color this year, with no less than 6 to 8 red dresses moving around the hall. But then I take another, slower look around. Only a couple of ladies can be called sexy. And only Jeannie is standing next to our assigned table with a younger guy. He's wearing the same suit I'm wearing, but that's where the similarities end. If I look like a thoroughly shaved gorilla in a suit buttoned up, the guy looks like he was born in it. I walk over to them, noticing that they are standing very close to each other. There are a few other people nearby, but none of them are close enough to engage in conversation with them. My intuition goes from concern to piercing realization in the blink of an eye. Noticing my approach, Jeannie takes a small step back, and after a brief contact with my eyes, she averted hers. Seeing her reaction, her companion stared in my direction for the 4 long strides separating us. Jeannie introduced him. Dave, this is Clive, my new boss, who I may have told you about. I don't need to hear that name. I've already guessed who the bastard is by his smile. It is a smug, boastful, not so subtle, I used your wife smile. A rage rises in me the likes of which I've never felt before. I really want to drive my fist into his gloating face, but I restrain myself from doing so. He reaches out his hand just as I think he realizes the mistake he's making by gloating. As befits his nature, his hand is raised high and flat, palm facing the floor in the dominant stance of men with big egos. I contemplate whether to do something about this weak, manicured offering, but I do. No sooner do I take his hand in mine than I feel him trying to pull away, but I don't let him. I move our palms into the traditional upright position and squeeze some more. His hands are used to pushing knobs, tapping on sleek keyboards, and fondling other people's wives. Mine are calloused and strong, used to holding scissors and restraining unruly sheep. It's no contest at all. I squeeze some more. The last thing I see before my gaze shifts to my wife is blood pouring from the asshole's face. I can feel the bones in his hand crunching. Jeannie hears the groan that escapes his lips. A look of confusion appears on her face. She looks at our joined hands, lifts her gaze to my face and knows her secret is out, knows there will be no forgiveness from me, knows we won't have the children we recently talked about, knows it's over between us. She brings her hand up to her mouth. I stare at her in silence. I increase the pressure on the feminine hand in mine. His left hand comes to the aid of his right wrist, grabbing, trying in vain to pull us apart. Only after a few seconds does he realize it's futile. He slowly sinks to his knees, his moans growing louder. But I continue to build up the tension. I feel more and more silence coming from our little table, but I don't even pay attention to the guy. I keep my eyes on Jeannie. She's clearly fighting the urge to run away. I think it's my gaze that's holding her in place. The kneeling man lets out a high-pitched scream, more like a little girl's squeal when I feel something snap in his paw. I increase the pressure some more. Tears are already streaming down his face. Jeannie's are too. The look on his face is as far from the gloating smile he greeted me with as is even possible. There's silence in the room, aside from our little circle of sobs and squeals. Jeannie breaks eye contact, her gaze shifting to the man who had just entered my peripheral vision. From her words, Mr. Higgins. I realize who this new person is. The guy who built the company my wife works for from the ground up and who she speaks of with awe. Because I'm still looking at Jeannie, I feel rather than see the visitor cast a glance at the nearly crying, shrieking man, his sales manager, than my wife. Jeannie, on the other hand, looks anywhere but at me and the owner of the company. I feel someone's hand gently take my arm. The voice accompanying it sounds sympathetic. "All right, son, let him go. I'll take it from here." With a final squeeze that elicits a loud scream, I comply. My eyes encompass the scene as everyone in the room watches silently, realizing, mostly from the guilty look on Jeannie's face, why this humiliated man is literally suffering at my hand. Focusing on Mr. Higgins, I nod to the older man, and after casting one last glance at my soon-to-be ex-wife, turn and walk away, hearing at the same time, "Nigel, call an ambulance for my former sales manager, please. Mrs. Brown, come with me. I think we need to discuss your resignation." Story 2. I knew the moment of truth had come, the critical moment, the moment of final decision, the moment I've been dreading for weeks now. Strangely enough, this moment excited me more than anything I had experienced before. It's a strange place, perhaps the most arousing place I've ever been, a rather dirty toilet of a rundown bar. "Well, are you going to do it?" This is my friend, Lucy, and I knew that somehow her words meant that I was in a make-or-break moment. In fact, I should explain what has been going on to bring me to this point, shouldn't I? For 8 years, I was happily married to a wonderful guy. He was worth my giving up my wild tendencies, and we have a fantastic marriage. The only thing that disrupts our happiness is my inability to have children, but no matter what, our marriage suits me in every way. Then my old college friend Lucy came back to town and reminded me how simple life used to be. Simple and fun. She didn't let the fact that she was a married woman stop her from having fun. "It just makes me less active," she says all the time. When her husband was out of town, and he traveled a lot, she would head to bars in the most backwater parts of town. Let's just say she never had to buy her own booze, and she was never alone. Her tales of making love against the wall, in the bushes, in the back seat of some guy's car in the parking lot or at his house brought back fond memories of the old days. Lucy talked about how she had long, loving goodbye sessions with her husband in the morning, and then two bikers sleeping with her in a cheap motel the same evening. It made me clench my thighs and breathe hard. For months, she legitimized it in my head. I began to think I deserved what she was getting. She'd been doing this for years, and she'd never been caught. Was it really that hard to keep it a secret? I tried to resist, I really did. I tried to convince Dave when we were in bed to be more rough, more selfish, so I could close my eyes and pretend it was someone else. But Dave was still just Dave. Passionate, but gentle. The bastard actually cared about me. Then my husband announced he was going on his rare week-long business trip. Lucy constantly telling me her stories had pretty much brought me to a constant state of arousal, and 5 days without love while Dave was away made me boil over. So when Lucy offered to take advantage of Dave's absence and join her on one of her outings, my hormones took over from common sense. I joked that I'd just be her wingman for the night, but who was I kidding? Arriving at the bar, where I was treated to drinks by practically every guy there, I loosened up for some serious dancing. Dancing, during which I was crumpled, tormented, groped, and acted on with every other dirty verb you could think of. Lucy kept asking, "Have you chosen who you're with yet?" whenever our paths crossed in the crowded bar. Finally, she cornered me and dragged me into the bar's filthy restroom, where we took a seat in the adjoining booths. "It's time to decide, Sandy. I'm personally ready for love. You either pick one or two and join me, or catch yourself a cab home." I think it was her mention of two that had the effect of touching one of my favorite fantasies. "But not today," I scolded myself. "Take a walk before you run, Sandra. Just one guy today." "Okay, Lucy, how do I choose and what do I do?" Choosing is easy once you realize that almost all anonymous members are the same. Do what I did. Right now, take off your panties, crumple them up in your hand, walk back outside, and when you see a guy who isn't disgusted and will buy you a drink, give the panties to him. He'll know what it's all about. And leave all the logistical questions about where you're going to do it to him. Did you buy birth control like I suggested? Yeah, like a week ago. I heard Lucy stand up in her stall, then there was a shuffling sound before I saw a glimpse of the lace of her panties under the barrier between the stalls, reminding myself that I deserved it, and it was perfectly safe. I followed her lead. Looking at the silky lingerie in my hand, I felt a surge of power. One guy was going to be very lucky tonight, and who exactly, that would be literally depended on me. Blushing and stepping out of the stall, Lucy and I high-fived each other, and she said quietly, "Go, girl." After which she led me back to the meat market. Hiding my panties in my hand, I searched the dimly lit room for a tall guy with a neatly trimmed beard whose equipment felt quite decent as he rubbed against my leg in a dance. Great. Looks like he's one of the men waiting outside for Lucy and me. Mustering up my courage, I took a step toward him. With my left hand, I took his right hand and turned it so that it was ready to accept my gift. I wanted to demonstrate it. I hoped he'd smell them before he took me wherever he wanted to take me and do whatever he wanted to me. Maybe then I could go up to his room with him and ask if he had a friend who could join us tomorrow night when Dave was supposed to be out of town. Even in the dim lighting, I could see his eyes light up when he realized what I was holding. His hand rose of its own accord to accept my gift, which I lowered into his palm. Suddenly, there was a huge presence between us. A muscular hand appeared out of nowhere and grabbed my panties. With his free left hand, the unknown man lowered something else into my potential lover's empty palm. I looked down and saw that it was a man's wedding ring, its gold glinting in the faint light. Instinctively, I grabbed it, clenched it in my fist, and looked up. Dave was standing there looking at me with a look of hurt but determination on his face. He was in place and on standby, so he must have known not only what we were up to, but the whole panty thing. Later I thought about the hurtful things he could have said right now. Call me stupid, slutty, publicly shame or humiliate me, anything. Any of those things would be better than what he actually said. A fair exchange, I think. Shaking his head, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with the realization of what he thought was the value of our marriage, a pair of used silk panties. Story 3. In the last 2 minutes, my mind has gone through every emotion imaginable, from frustration to rage and finally, determination. For a couple weeks now, I had suspected that something was wrong with my wife of 14 years. She had gone from open and honest to secretive and unable to meet my gaze. I did everything suspicious husbands usually do. I installed a GPS tracker on her phone. I called her constantly during the workday, but nothing much happened. Still, the doubts remain. Rachel doesn't work outside the home, and if her car is always where it's supposed to be, and she's still cheating on the side, then she's either doing it at our house or getting a ride. Inquiries at work among co-workers who were forced to screw up in family court led me to the realization that I would either have to put up with my wife's misbehavior or become a part-time father. Neither option suits an underachiever like me. Close observation of Rachel over the course of several weeks revealed a pattern. A freshly washed wife and no eye contact on Wednesdays and Fridays, except for the week the painters come over. Today is Friday, and I got home 3 hours earlier than usual. Stopped on the street a stone's throw from the house and didn't open the garage door like I usually do. I silently peek into the garage to see if someone else's car is parked in my spot, but there isn't one. Then I quietly open the front door. I suspected it was going to be bad, but I had no idea exactly how bad. The sounds of grunts, groans, and creaking bed springs told me all I needed to know. Despite all my planning, I had no idea how I would react in that moment. The best way to describe my feelings was disappointment. That all changed when I peeked through the door jamb into the bedroom just in time to see some bastard pulling out of Rachel from behind, and she turned around. A little backstory. I get to enjoy Rachel once or twice a year. I start recording what's happening on my phone, hoping my hand isn't shaking too much from the rage that has supplanted the frustration. One look shows me that there's no way she's not a willing participant in the farce I'm witnessing. She devours it as if it were the last lollipop left on earth. The analytical part of me realizes that she is attracted to it. I'm a regular guy in my early 30s. Average weight, average height. This same guy is younger, trimmer, judging by his biceps and six-pack and better equipped than I am. That's an understatement. He's a fucking asshole. Wait a minute, I know him. He used to appear in the society pages of the local paper. He's married to the daughter of Andrew Falcone, supposedly a legitimate local businessman, but almost everyone knows he made his fortune the less legitimate Sicilian way. Even in the $5,000 suits, the inner thug peeks through. There are still rumors of the disappearance of several business competitors when he was just starting to make his fortune, and the hasty relocation to different states of competitors of some of his friends. A plan matures in my mind, and I put it into action, while the heartbreaking sounds from my bedroom only strengthen my resolve rather than distract from it. Back in the living room, I quickly look through the local business directory and jot down the number for Falcone Imports and Exports. With a mental nod, I quietly walk out the front door and walk 50 meters to the street corner. Turning my phone on camera mode, I zoom in on the sign with our street name and walk leisurely toward the house, trying to show the front of the house with the license plate attached to the fence, but not capturing my car. I continue down the lane and walk through the front door. Stopping the recording, I attach the clip to Falcone's message with a few simple words. Walk with me. I stare at the screen, silently counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until I reach the number 14. 14 seconds, one for each year of my marriage, then I press send. The second entry, the fateful one, followed immediately after the first. There is no pause. I calmly pull away and head to the school where the kids attend. Every now and then, I pick them up and take them somewhere to play before heading home for dinner. Tonight, I suspect it will be the playground, dinner at Hungry Jack's, Australia's version of Burger King, and then the longest kids' movie night this week. Hopefully, they'll be tired enough to fall asleep in the car. Who knows what I'll find when I get home? Story 4. I'll let you in on a little secret. I hate wankers. You know the kind of guys I mean. The ones with the big bushy beards because some celebrity got photographed with one and suddenly all the hipsters are wearing it. Those with jeans ripped at the knees because, again, some celebrity was spotted looking like that. One member of this breed of wanker was none too pleased when I pointed out that it was an outdated trend of my youth, the 1980s. However, I was not a wanker then, and refused to be one now. Moving forward in line at the local McDonald's, I lamented the fact that the guy in front of me is a stereotypical wanker to the point of nausea. Thick beard, check. Fancy tattoos of Marvel Comics characters that in 10 years will look just plain stupid on a 45-year-old man, check. Jeans fashionably ripped at the knees, check. Leather loafers, check. The shoulder bag, check. And let's not forget the super dark sunglasses worn over the eyes, check. At this point, the hipster's cell phone rang, and he swaggered over to pull it out of his belt pouch, no doubt hoping that everyone within reach would realize that it was the latest and greatest iPhone model, so superior and so much more expensive than everyone else around. I was waiting for the inevitable. Assholes like this just have to do it. Quiet conversation with a phone pressed to your ear is not for guys like this. Oh no. One button to answer the call, the other to put it on speakerphone, so everyone within spitting distance, tempting, isn't it, could hear both sides of the conversation. Hello, doll. Hey, stud. What are you up to? Hey. Oh, just looking for dinner to replenish the juice you've been sucking out of me all day. The last word was followed by a half squeal, from the phone speaker. Justin, how many times do I have to tell you to shut up about my husband? He's doing a great job, and I will not let you denigrate him like that, okay? Gee, fine words from a woman who just spent half a day with another guy in her husband's bed. Don't bite my fucking head off. Sorry, Justin, I'm very protective of Daryl, you know that. He can't do anything about being exhausted after all that overtime. He wants the kids to graduate without student loans, and for that I love him. But I also love what you can provide me. The guy looked around, glowering, clearly hoping everyone had heard him. I wish I hadn't. The conversation was disgusting. Guys like that should be castrated. Unfortunately, the conversation didn't end there. It was predictable. I pretended to read a text message on my phone. Are you sure you can't lose hubby for a couple hours this evening so we can finish what we started earlier? Tempting, big guy, but I'm sore after tonight. It takes me a couple days to recover. Besides, Daryl will be home soon. He called 10 minutes ago and said he'd pick up some burgers on the way home. At that moment, I reached over my lover's shoulder and snatched the phone from him. Bringing it up to my mouth, I growled, "That's right, Veronica. And about your burger. Which one do you want again? The Quarter Pounder or a Big Mac?" All that came out of the speaker was a high-pitched scream and the sound of the phone hitting the floor. I entered the personal space of this oh-so-average trendsetter with a thunderous squall expression on my face. He had to awkwardly tilt his head back to look at me. There was a mask of horror on his face. I was a good 30 centimeters taller than him, and I don't know where all his blood had gone, but it had definitely ebbed away from his face. He saw the biceps on my arms and the huge calloused palms, the products of years of conscientious manual labor. I reached down and with my left hand grabbed his genitals through his puffer jeans. He automatically stood up on his toes. I looked around at the whole crowd of people, carefully pretending not to notice anything. Apparently, they weren't too fond of wankers either. I squeezed both hands. The right made the phone crackle and break. The left caused an unearthly scream. What can I say? Some things break easier than others. Story 5. It's a gorgeous spring day, and an educational counselor is teaching a photography elective to an 11th grade class at a local park. With cameras in hand, everyone is sitting on the grass in a circle around a professional photographer. So, guys and gals, for the past 2 semesters, we've been discussing the technical aspects of photography. In other words, you've learned how to take a photograph with the intention of an artistic shot, not just using an automatic function. Now I want to discuss copyright and legal issues. The class was buzzing. Everyone was looking forward to spending an hour in the sun. They could discuss all this in class, rather than walking 7 blocks to the park. First, copyright. If you take a picture with a company camera on company time, the company owns the copyright. If it's your camera and your time, it's yours. If it's your camera during business hours, then copyright gets a little murky, okay? The class nodded. It all seemed simple and straightforward. So, what exactly and who are you allowed to photograph and under what circumstances? The consultant didn't wait for the group to speculate. Well, here are some examples. You can take pictures of those kids playing over there, but you can't publish them commercially without getting permission from their parents. Technically, you can't even post them on social media, but the courts in this country never bother to enforce that requirement. So, can anyone tell me how legal it is to say take a picture of someone through the window of that motel over there? The students automatically turned around to look at the edge of the park a stone's throw away. On the other side of the parking lot, a two-story row of rooms loomed under the sign of a cheap motel chain, the peeling paint on their facade emphasizing their age. The general consensus was that filming through the window would be an invasion of privacy. The teacher agreed, noting that while it wasn't technically illegal to take pictures, publishing them anywhere, including on social media, would put the shooter in deep shit if they didn't get the approval of the subject. He glanced at his watch. Now let's do a little exercise. Stay where you are, but line up facing the motel. Get your cameras ready. I want you to take a picture of the next person or people you see in the parking lot. Alternatively, you can put your camera in continuous mode and take a few shots. This technique is often used by both paparazzi and sports photographers. After you take the pictures, we will discuss which ones you can use. The class complied with the instruction, many grinning slyly. It wasn't often they were given permission for a little voyeurism. A cleaning lady wheeled a cart up to one of the rooms, stepped inside and disappeared. The clicking and whirring of expensive cameras was heard. This was a fairly elite school in a wealthy suburb, and no parent wanted their child to be seen with anything but a professional-grade camera and lens. There were only a few cars in the parking lot at this time of day. At almost exactly 1:50 p.m., one opened from the first-floor doors, and a dapperly dressed man stepped out, adjusting his tie. At the door, he turned and passionately, within seconds, kissed the partially dressed woman standing behind him. Beyond earshot, 24 cameras clicked and buzzed. The woman hurriedly closed the motel room door, and the man turned and headed toward a late-model SUV. Some of the students continued to film his progress even after he pulled out of the parking lot and drove away. The students lowered their cameras and stared at each other incredulously. In the viewfinders, most of them recognized Mr. Butterworth, the school principal, and Miss O'Connor, one of the school's English teachers. They were too stunned to speak. The silence was filled by the photography counselor. What a fantastic example. Now who can show me some pictures and tell me what can and can't be done with them? One of the students, whose camera had a large screen, pointed that one at the teacher, who looked at the screen and told the others. Great example. Nice framing of the photo, Thomas. The shot shows two people hugging and kissing in a doorway. The man is clearly outside the room in a public place like us. The lady is inside the room in a private area. So it is perfectly legal to take photos of the man, however. If you try to capitalize on the images, you may well find yourself in a tricky situation legally. You can post them on social media, and the man can remove them with an injunction. But if you are sued, you will make history. He watched most of the class practically drooling, wishing the teacher would shut up so they could publish the juicy gossip as quickly as possible. If you don't delete the shots of the woman, which is clearly an invasion of her privacy, you could be in deep shit from a legal standpoint. If someone gets a snapshot of her breasts exposed due to an unbuttoned blouse and tries to publish it, even on social media, you're going to get really hurt under the laws of public decency. Most of the class groaned disappointedly, and then quickly looked through their own pictures to see if they had captured their pretty English teacher's breasts. Unless, of course, the lady in question gave permission to publish. Anyone want to ask her permission? Many of the students had been studying with Miss O'Connor for several years, and not one of them she'd sent to detention. Almost everyone raised their hands. That's right. Then let's go. Jason, you will knock on the door, and when she opens it, you will state your position clearly and concisely. You are to tell her that you took some pictures of her saying goodbye to a gentleman a few minutes ago, and one or more of them show her bare breasts, and whether she can give her blessing for the public use of the pictures. The professional photographer smirked at the tall student, and the latter smiled back. It was a game, and both knew it. The entire class walked straight through the parking lot and ended up on a covered walkway 3 doors down from the right room. As they approached the suite, the door opened, and Miss O'Connor, now decently dressed, stepped out and closed the door behind her. Her face stretched as she recognized some of the people walking towards her as her former or current students. The group was led by Jason. "Miss O'Connor, we inadvertently took some pictures of you through the open door, and we're wondering if you would give us permission to publish them. If you wish, we can exclude the ones showing your left breast." Miss O'Connor turned crimson-white for a few seconds, and then purple-red with embarrassment. They had seen Clive leave and knew she was not his wife. If this got to the school board, her job would be in jeopardy, and she would find it very difficult to hide it from her husband. The students really enjoyed the performance. Finally, she came to her senses. "You certainly won't have my permission to do anything but delete all the pictures you have. What I do in my spare time is none of your or anyone else's business. What two consenting adults do is their business. And if this gets out, I can tell you, I don't expect either of you to pass 11th grade English." She tried to look around at the students in the front row of the crowd, trying to look brave even though she was scared. Under her hard stare, many of them lowered their eyes. Someone stepped out of the crowd from behind tall Jason's back, making him stand out from the crowd. Miss O'Connor's face turned even whiter than before, and her knees buckled so badly she nearly fell on them. "Dave, I'm sorry, darling. It's not what it seems." Dave Brown only shook his head and walked away. The class followed him, shouting over his shoulder, "Ooh, gotcha." "Good luck, Miss O." "Nice tits, teacher." Susan O'Connor, who never took her husband's last name, went back to school and her lover to try to rectify the situation. As Susan returned to her class after her free time, Clive Butterworth tried everything he could, but realized it was futile. Two of the students involved were children of school board members. He sat in his office shivering until the inevitable phone call came. "Please see to it that you and Miss O'Connor stay there until the board meets tonight." Epilogue. At 8:05 p.m., newly unemployed Susan O'Connor returned to her home to find all her clothes piled in the garage, and her keys no longer fit the house locks. Broken and demoralized, she stopped pounding on the door after only 5 minutes, packed up what she could fit in the trunk and back seat of her car, and drove to another motel. She knew that trying to get Dave to forgive her was a waste of time. Deep down, she'd always known that. She just hadn't had the strength to reject the advances of the powerful Clive Butterworth, and she'd relied on her and his wits to keep her from getting caught. Like most cheaters, she subconsciously considered a small chance of being caught an acceptable risk. She never thought about how it would affect society, as she didn't assume there would be any evidence of an affair. After unpacking enough clothes for a couple days, she began to research privacy laws. What she read began to fill her with dread. The phone calls started before 10 the next morning. Colleague teachers, friends, and relatives called. "Have you been on Facebook this morning? Clive was all over it. Looks like he was having an affair. There's a picture of Clive, but the face of the woman he's with is blurred. Why aren't you at school today? So we've been friends with you and Dave for years. Don't tell me it's you in those pictures. The mermaid tattoo is exactly like the one on your shoulder. Stay away from me and my husband." Really? How could you do that to Dave? Perhaps, worst of all, were longtime friends who didn't even have the decency to talk to her, and who simply sent her a curt message condemning what she had done to a once-proud marriage and a decent man. At 12:25 p.m., the first truly horrifying text arrived. It was from one of the male teachers at her school. "Nice tits. Would you like to get together tonight?" Sue went searching and soon found a social networking site that made her go cold. There was a series of 3 pictures. The first showed a man and a woman kissing in the doorway of a motel room with the back of the man's head covering her face. The second showed Clive moving away from the door, his face clearly visible, while she looked fondly at his receding back. The third was an enlarged shot of her bare left breast, exposed by the unbuttoned blouse. Within 2 hours, 11 more such messages arrived. By 6 p.m., the calls had stopped. Susan O'Connor had no female friends left. The next day, when Susan went out on the street, people stared at her or stopped and pointed fingers. She hurried back to the safety of her room and ordered room service. She could have sworn she heard a chuckle in the receptionist's voice as she took the order. Desperate for a shoulder to cry on, or at least a hint of support, Susan drove up to her parents' house 2 days later. Halfway there, she was intercepted by her worried mother and told to stay away until her father calmed down a bit. Apart from the fact that he was a long-standing member of the school council, and having to endure the stares of the other members when the antics of his daughter and Clive Butterworth were discussed at length, Dave was like the son her father had never had. Susan begged her mother to meet her somewhere, but she said she wouldn't dare. So distraught was her father. Lonely and fearful for her future, Susan knocked on the door of her old house 2 days later. By her desperate logic, if she could get Dave to forgive her, other people could too. She didn't hope they would make up, but she hoped that at some point his good nature would allow him to forgive her. Dave opened the front door at her knock and immediately looked over her shoulders up and down the street. "Could you come in the back way, Susan? I'm a little uncomfortable being seen with you." After days of trauma, something inside Susan shivered. "What the hell? You're the one who publicly humiliated me. You're the reason I lost all my friends. You made me the target of every pervert in town. You made me ashamed to show my face during daylight hours." Dave just grinned. Story 6. The fingers that ran across my mini-skirt-clad ass as I stood face-to-face with my coworker Julie at a company Christmas party sent a plume of sparks straight to my libido. No matter what you say, at 48, no glances in the mirror, no compliments from my husband or coworkers and friends are as convincing that you still have it all to do as physical touch. The simple act of 3 or 4 fingers slowly and sensually working their way from my left buttock to my right along the line of my super short dress, sometimes over silky fabric, sometimes over silkier skin, exactly halfway along the line of my panty-covered crotch, pressing briefly but insistently. The touch of the guy who walked so slowly behind me made me wet in the 3 seconds it took for it to happen. Julie was no doubt marveling at the blissful smile on my face, and I was reflecting on how wonderful my life was. Here I am celebrating my first Christmas as a newly promoted manager in an industry that until recently was male-dominated. A woman who just last week attended the college graduation of her youngest child, who was top of the class and destined for greatness. I have a husband who also built a successful business with his own hands, his own blood, sweat, and tears. A husband who always puts me above all other demands on his time, and even after more than 25 years of marriage, shows me how attractive he thinks I still am, at least a few times a week impromptu. A husband who, last time I checked, was talking to the owner of my company across the room. I glanced at the receding back of the bearer of the fiery fingers to make sure it was Jacob, and not some soon-to-be squirming on half, grabbing at his eggs and then receiving a slap for sexual violence random passerby. No, it's him, my lover 15 years younger than me, the real reason my life is going so damn well at the moment. He strides away from me, half-turned over his shoulder, a smile playing across his face. Thank God, no sign of that smug smile he had when I introduced him to my husband Dave earlier in the evening. When he sensed I was looking at his receding back, he lifted his fingers and ran them under my nose, letting me know that he knew I was aroused, and he knew it was him who was arousing me. It was probably best to never tell him that if he smelled anything, it was probably from when I came out of the bathroom and found Dave dressing for the party in the master bedroom. He took one look at me, his nostrils flared, and he possessed me. Just pushed me onto the bed, dropped his briefs, slid my panties aside, and took me. That's what I mean, with that kind of proof that 2 handsome men find me irresistible. I'm a happy wife, mother, and woman on my way up the career ladder. I smiled back at Jacob and wondered if I should back off my strict safety rules for once. Text Jacob to meet me in one of the dressing rooms. I'd slept with Dave and Jacob on the same day several times before, and to say it was hot was a major understatement. Just thinking about it was enough to make me breathe heavily. The thought of dragging Dave into the dressing room flashed through my mind, but I quickly dismissed it. 1, Jacob wouldn't like me rubbing it in his nose that I still loved my husband, and 2, hot and dirty situations on dressing room chairs were for lovers, not husbands. I fought the almost irresistible urge to text Jacob to meet me. For 8 months now, I have had a lover, going unnoticed, carefully choosing the time and place of the meeting, and how I tidied up before and after meeting him. I also know that how I behave around my husband plays a huge part in this. I am very careful and do not show him any less respect than I always have, even when I stab him in the back in perhaps the worst way a wife can. And yes, I know I do exactly that, but the temptation of illicit love with a young and handsome stallion is beyond me. I respect Dave, and I sure as hell hope Jacob respects that sentiment. But no, this immature little jerk has to sneer and try to smear Dave at every mention of his name. I guess this situation is a self-evident truth all over the world. The hubby has no idea the lover exists, but the lover knows all about his rival. Yes, I understand why it makes him feel superior, but does it really require that little asshole to smirk so openly in Dave's face? I hope it didn't look too suspicious when that smirk made me grab Jacob by the elbow and drag him away right after I'd introduced them earlier in the evening. But that was before, and what's on Jacob's face as he walks away now is just a boyish grin. He knows exactly what he just did to me, and what I want to do to him in the privacy of the back room. He's headed to the part of the room where Dave is, and I sincerely hope my sexy but so naughty boy isn't going to go and talk to him. Not with this attitude. I'm under no illusions about the chances of my marriage surviving if Dave finds out about my long-standing affair. I'm not ruling out that Jacob might subconsciously bring us out. He makes no secret of wanting me to belong only to him. I don't have the heart to tell him that an open relationship with someone who is old enough to be my son and also a subordinate will never be part of this ambitious woman's future. Like I said, I just hope my little boy toy behaves himself. I increased my focal length to see where Jacob was actually heading and froze. He seemed to be heading straight for my husband. I think my heart stopped. I know I even took a step or two backward as Julie had to support me, and my gaze focused on my husband's face about 25 feet away. The look on Dave's face made it clear that he'd seen everything. Jacob's hand stroking my buttocks, his lustful grin, and my answering, seductive, loving smile. All the actions of a sexually comfortable couple in an emotionally intimate relationship. In an instant, I realized that my happy, peaceful marriage was a thing of the past, dead as a fossil. In front of me flashed, or should I say, loomed, a future. A future of devastated children who, if the news of their family's destruction wasn't enough, would soon have to choose who to be loyal to. A mother who had made a career out of dropping them at an early age into various daycare centers. The mother who proved herself to be a liar and cheater. Or an emotionally wounded, loving father frantically trying to pull out the knife firmly planted in his back. I wasn't at all sure I was going to make it through this contest. Who am I kidding? I lost before I even started defending myself. The same can be said for girlfriends and relatives. How many of them would choose a cheater over St. Dave? Damn it. Why didn't I think of all this before? Why? Because I was an arrogant fool. That's why. As I watched, Dave's face changed from shock to growing anger and then immediately to rage. His frenzied eyes accused me of killing the life he thought was his. A life that he now knew was a lie. I just couldn't look at that anger, and my gaze, as if living a life of its own, darted to the right. Right at the still shocked look on the face of Mr. Grace, the owner of my company, a secular preacher, a champion of morality and gender equality in the company. That's why I was promoted. His face told me everything I needed to know. He'd been watching me along with Dave when Jacob had done his little trick of not checking first to see if there were watching eyes. If he hadn't already, he'd soon come to the conclusion that he'd witnessed the caresses of two hardened lovers. Evidence of a relationship so far removed from his worldview that it seems almost alien. I knew my career with this company was over, and there would be no rave review to thank me for 26 years of loyal service. Not only that, but I would have to move a great distance from this city to try to qualify for at least a clerical position. I cowardly shifted my gaze from this new source of horror to Jacob's receding back. Everything that had happened up to that point had taken seconds, because my lover's face was still half turned toward me, and he had traveled only 2/3 of the distance between my doomed marriage and his victim. The fool has no idea what he's gotten himself into. His plans clearly included a little gloating over my husband, ex-husband. As he approached the group surrounding Dave, He turned his full attention to them and turned his face completely away from me. I could see his expression in the mirror behind Dave and Mr. Grace. It had gone from a boyish grin to an outright sneer. It took 4 more steps and less than a second for him to realize the expression on his intended victim's face, but his feet continued to move automatically. Then his face suddenly stretched, and before 2 steps his feet stopped. I could tell with half a second's accuracy when he realized it. Realized with a terrifying certainty that he would not be able to gloat today. His face turned deathly white. No, it turned gray, chalky gray, as he looked at the guy he was walking toward. The guy was about 15 centimeters taller than him, and the distance between his pecs was about the length of an axe handle. Mesmerized, like when an accident happens before your eyes, when you squint your eyes at a gruesome scene in a horror movie, I watched the inevitable happen. Dave took the last 2 steps toward the motionless man, and a lightning-fast right fist strike landed in the flaccid stomach of the office worker. The sound of every molecule of air expelling from Jacob's lungs overrode all other sounds in the room. As Jacob bent in half, his face collided with Dave's knee, which went up. Dave hadn't always been the gentleman he seemed now. In his youth, he'd had to claw his way out of the gutter, scratching, biting, and barking. Jacob fell like he'd been hit over the head with a shoe. I saw Dave stomping on something in the man's lower body until Mr. Grace dragged him away. Barely seeing that the angry man's rage had sufficiently subsided, Mr. Grace walked over to the nearest group of people and started talking, I'm sure explaining that they had just seen and witnessed nothing. I ran off. The end.